And unless nations redouble efforts to secure nuclear and radiological materials, Jake, officials fear such a scenario could be inevitable.
It's terrifying. Elise Labba, thank you. Welcome back to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. Topping our world lead today, a nightmare scenario for military and intelligence officials. ISIS in possession of a nuclear weapon. Now, the idea may seem far-fetched to you, but it is taken very seriously by top officials in the U.S. government. After all, the terrorist group has already used chemical weapons and expressed a desire to get nuclear ones. It's a fear President Obama has discussed openly.
If we discovered that ISIL had gotten possession of a nuclear weapon and we had to run an operation to get it out of their hands, then yes, you can anticipate that not only would Chairman Dempsey recommend me sending U.S. ground troops to get that weapon out of their hands, but I would order it.
Let's get right to CNN Global Affairs correspondent Elise Labba. Elise, this is sure to be addressed when President Obama hosts several world leaders at a nuclear security summit in Washington tomorrow.
That's right, Jake. Well, keeping nuclear material out of terrorists' hands was already topping the agenda. And with new evidence ISIS has its eye on nuclear facilities and scientists, the need to secure the world's nuclear material has become even more urgent.
Raiding the home of a suspected planner of last November's Paris attacks, Belgian authorities found surveillance video of a top Belgian nuclear scientist. That suspect, part of the same ISIS cell accused of last week's attacks in Belgium. The shocking discovery turned the heads of counterterrorism experts, who fear Belgium, with several previous nuclear breaches, could be at risk for terrorists to obtain radiological materials for a so-called dirty bomb.
A small dirty bomb would not just cause panic, it would not just cause people to flee the city, it would contaminate tens of square blocks for years.
Those fears now top the agenda at this week's nuclear summit. President Obama first convened the gathering of world leaders 6 years ago, issuing a call to action.
It is increasingly clear that the danger of nuclear terrorism is one of the greatest threats to global security.
Since that warning, 12 countries have eliminated nuclear material, but tons of unsecured weapons-grade material remains in 25 countries. And ISIS, barely on the radar at the time of the first summit, is now a global network, already using chemical weapons on the battlefield. A recent Harvard University report warned that despite modest improvements in nuclear security, the capability of groups, especially ISIS, has, quote, grown dramatically, suggesting overall the risk of nuclear terrorism may have increased.
We don't know what the terrorist threat is going to look like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And to me, that's even stronger reason to lock down all the ingredients of a potential nuclear recipe.
Now, White House officials and experts stress there is no firm evidence ISIS is trying to build a nuclear device. The mechanics of assembling a crude dirty bomb are relatively simple, and ISIS does have the global network to recruit the experts needed. And unless nations redouble efforts to secure nuclear and radiological materials, Jake, officials fear such a scenario could be inevitable.
It's terrifying. Elise Labba, thank you so much. Next in the national lead.
Inevitable.
It's terrifying.
Inevitable.
It's terrifying.
Inevitable.
It's terrifying.
The debate about nuclear not only relates to energy, but weapons too. And here's one fact you may not remember. The U.S. stores its own nuclear bombs in 5 European countries. They were put there during the Cold War to deter the Soviet Union. Now, Turkey is the only country on that list which does not have its own nuclear program, neither energy nor military. With relations between Washington and Ankara seemingly entering a cold phase, there's now a lot of speculation regarding the future of American nukes in Turkey. RT's Alexei Yarashevsky explains.
In the 1960s, at the height of Cold War and following the Cuban Missile Crisis, the U.S. placed almost 200 nuclear bombs on Allied bases in Europe as a deterrent for the Soviet nuclear capabilities. The Cold War is believed to be gone now, but the mankind's most destructive weapons are still there. And the largest stockpile is at Incirlik U.S. Air Base in Turkey, some 100 miles from the Syrian border. There are no official numbers as to how many nuclear warheads are there, but different estimates suggest that facility has 25 underground vaults, each able to carry up to 4 bombs. It is believed that at least half of them are filled, meaning that there are at least 50 B-61 thermonuclear bombs stored there. This is United States' largest stockpile in Europe, more than a quarter of its total nuclear arsenal in the old world. As I've said, the initial goal of placing the nukes there, the Cold War, has been irrelevant for the last 3 decades, or at least we are led to believe that. That's why some European countries carrying U.S. nuclear stockpiles, including Germany, have been rallying to have the nukes removed. Not Turkey, though. From Ankara's perspective, it feels safer having American A-bombs on its soil, especially considering new challenges to global security, the biggest of them being ISIS operating in its backyard. But here comes the unexpected twist. 2 days ago, the Wall Street Journal reported that Obama had turned down an official meeting with Turkey's leader Erdogan during, ironically, a nuclear summit in Washington, D.C. this month. Now, a lot of pundits in Europe began speculating whether the cold spell in relations may lead to U.S. pulling out of its nuclear arsenal from Turkey and in turn spurn Ankara to develop its own nuclear weapons program. Such notions are not entirely baseless. Last year, national interest broke down in detail why Turkey may be on the path to its own nukes, from aggressively pursuing nuclear energy program to publicly stating intention to upgrade its army's missiles from mid-range to long-range. Combine the two, put them in a mixer, and there you go. And on top of that, Turkey as a U.S. ally has never been on the list of usual suspects like Iran and North Korea. But here comes another side of the coin. Remember the first months of Obama's presidency when he traveled to Prague and made this historic speech.
So today, I state clearly and with conviction America's commitment to seek the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons.
Well, the U.S. president has been criticized a lot for not keeping initial promises, and this may easily be one of them. In 2010, DOD's nuclear posture review was quoted by, guess who, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, that U.S. development of new U.S. nuclear weapons and new missions and capabilities for existing weapons was ruled out. Last year, however, DOD made no secret of its plans to upgrade U.S. nukes in Europe, an $8 billion plan expected to be fully implemented by the year 2024, basically replacing obsolete 1960s B-61 bombs with newer, capable versions, in a nutshell, turning useless bombs into usable. The two words usable and bombs, which Obama himself said should not be used in the same context for the sake of preserving humanity. Alexei Rashevsky, RT, reporting from Washington, D.C.
The United States has ordered hundreds of relatives of U.S. diplomats and military personnel to leave certain parts of Turkey. Officials fear there is an increasing danger of Americans being targeted by ISIL or other extremist groups. Al Jazeera's national security correspondent Jamie McIntyre has more now from the Pentagon.
Tony, both the Pentagon and State Department said the mandatory ordered departure of more than 700 U.S. military and government employee dependents was not the result of any specific intelligence, but rather in response to the overall deteriorating security situation in Turkey and the increasing threat of a mass casualty attack. At Turkey's Incirlik Air Base, where U.S. and coalition jets launch daily attacks against ISIL in Iraq and Syria, the base school was closed last week, officials citing unspecified force protection concerns. Now the U.S. is ordering most, but not all, families of State Department and American military personnel to pack up and leave, out of what the Pentagon called an abundance of caution.
And so we want to take this step now as we can in a safe and deliberate fashion, and to try and minimize the disruption to those families. We realize this is a disruption, and we obviously sympathize with that, but at the same time, we feel we have a responsibility to do everything we can to ensure their safety, and that's what this represents.
The order applies to dependents in 3 areas of Turkey considered dangerous: Adana, which is near the Incirlik Air Base in the south, along with Izmir and Mugla in the west. Not affected are dependents in the Turkish capital Ankara in the north and Istanbul in the far northwest, both of which are considered safer. The State Department says the evacuation order was weeks in the making and done in full consultation with Turkey.
The decision to do this, first of all, wasn't taken lightly. It was done after careful thought and consideration and interagency coordination, I might add. And I think it's very much a result of our ongoing assessment of security conditions there in Turkey and in recognition of the threat environment in Adana, specifically in southeastern Turkey, from a regional perspective.
While the order applies only to families of U.S. government employees and military dependents, the State Department also issued a general travel warning for any Americans in Turkey. It cited increased threats from terrorist groups throughout Turkey, noting that foreign and U.S. tourists have been explicitly targeted, and urging everyone to avoid visiting southeastern Turkey, especially areas near the Syrian border. The departure of U.S. dependents from Turkey comes as Turkish officials are traveling to Washington for a summit on nuclear proliferation. But the State Department insists there was no connection. And the U.S. European Command says the move is temporary, that so-called accompanied tours may resume in Turkey as soon as the threat subsides. Tony?
Jamie McIntyre reporting from the Pentagon.
Inevitable.
It's terrifying.
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 Inevitable.
It's terrifying.